So I've heard that fighting games are filled to the brim with mechanics, so let me see what that's all about. Whoa! I saw at least 3 mechanics in there! Okay, I gotta take a break. This was too much for me to handle. Here's another fighting game video. I decided to make at least one every year now. Fighting games are such an interesting and complicated genre of video games, but it's so much fun analyzing them. This time around, I wanted to focus on the mechanics they have. Fighting games are filled with mechanics, but first, I need to define what a game mechanic is so we're all on the same page. Well, to put it in simple terms, it's pretty much things that build the game to what it is. What that ultimately means is anything you do in the game that affects the gameplay in any way is a mechanic. I'm pretty sure if I had to explain what I meant, then I didn't put it in simple terms. So pretty much, fighting games have a bunch. I'll go over 2 types of mechanics these games have. Common mechanics where you would find in many places, and uncommon mechanics where you wouldn't typically see them. I'm probably not gonna go over all possible mechanics from these games, so if you have anything to add, go ahead and put it in the comments. Starting off with some common mechanics, there's a lot. I mean, movement counts. Well, that's typical to see in any game really. But many games give you the ability to double jump, and there are also a handful that only have 1 jump. That does change the gameplay quite a bit. I mean, games that give you the ability to double jump would typically be combo heavy, while 1 jump games would pretty much be used for some sort of anti-air. It could also just get you to the other side of the opponent or dodge. But that's the same with double jumping. There's a dash which almost every fighting game has. The character would do some sort of dash forwards or backwards depending on what you input. It's pretty much a mix-up or a dodge option. Maybe you could even use it as a way to get closer to your opponent if necessary. There's also the air dash, which is typical to see in anime fighters, which just make air movement a lot easier. If this was in a game like Street Fighter, then Street Fighter would be a very different game. The rest of the movement options are pretty typical to see in any game really. Crouching, walking, running, you get the point. When it comes to attacks, this is where fighting games are very different to other genres of video games and can even be different to other fighting games. However, what's common in these games are they more or less have something called command normals. I talked about these in my fighting game control video, but a large majority of fighting games have these. They aren't so common on anime fighters, but they are for grounded types of fighting games. So your Tekken, Street Fighter, KOF, and a bunch more. But they're even present in a game like Smash. You heard me. The tilts in Smash somewhat count as command normals. They exist for the sake of making grounded combos possible. If they were in anime fighters, TODs would be a lot more common. But then Tekken exists. I guess anime fighters and now more recent fighting games just use auto combos instead of command normals. That's a literal game changer. I mean, weren't some characters with modern controls a problem at the start of Street Fighter 6? I wouldn't know since I don't have that game and didn't play it early. Every fighting game has specials, right? That's what makes them unique. The method that they incorporate these specials may vary, like input commands or a more simplified button tap. However, they do end up changing the pace of a fighting game. Well, I was talking about the fact that you can special, but the way you input it too, I guess. Specials can be the deciding factor whether you win or lose a game. I'm sure that if Street Fighter was a normals only game, it would be a very different game. I guess it would feel more like a street fight. Specials tend to be more rewarding to the player, but for that reason, specials can also be a punishing thing as it can have lag before you can act again. So it makes them situational and ensures you are not just using it all the time. But if it were an online match, good luck reacting against them. Uncommon mechanics are mechanics that wouldn't really show up in other fighting games. And by that description, you might guess what game I'm about to bring up since I always do in one of these videos. Smash has a plethora of these. And as I said before, I know it's considered to be a party game, but how many people really call it that? Let's get real, it's just a fighting game. Anyways, there's one big thing that stands out in Smash.
Okay, maybe more than one, but the main thing I want to talk about is the stages. You'll never see a normal fighting game with such unique stage layouts. This was such an uncommon mechanic that it ended up making an entire genre of fighting games. The platform fighter. Believe me when I say this, but platforms are a literal game changer. Play in Final Destination, then play in Battlefield, and you'll definitely tell that there's a difference. And obviously, Smash does have a bunch of other stages, but for the most part, they're pretty game changing. So much so that in competitive Smash, there are only a handful of stages allowed. Tag team is a really cool mechanic. A handful of fighting games have this where it would typically be the whole mechanic of a game. Tag team games are very different from one-on-one games. KOF somewhat counts as a tag team game, but if anything, it's more like a team game. 3-on-3s rather than 1-on-1s. But actual tag team games are very cool. This is my favorite fighting game genre. The fact that you have to play more than one character in a match is really interesting. You could switch back and forth between these characters. The way health and damage are dealt with is different from typical fighters. That way, a match wouldn't take a long time. They can be a bit longer than 2 rounds in a fighting game, but they are also eventful. Once everyone's health is depleted, the match is over.
But then Tekken exists.
Tekken Tag Team is a bit different. Instead of both characters losing all their health, it only counts if one character loses all of it. So that way, you have to be mindful of your character's health.
It sounds as if I'm telling you to make sure they're healthy.
Tag teams are really fun, and they really do feel like a really different game altogether. If you've never played one, you really should. There are a whole lot of fighting game mechanics that you can imagine. Health, damage dealt, speed of a character, buffs you can receive during a match, and many more do count as mechanics. However, if I did end up going over all of that, this video wouldn't have come out this week. But what can I say? If fighting games were all the same, these mechanics would have been the same too.
Fighting games are very technical in more ways than one. They're complicated to make, they're complicated to be good at, and they're complicated in anything between that. Analyzing fighting games is always a treat, and discovering the different mechanics in them was definitely worth it. What do you guys think about fighting games and their mechanics? Leave your thoughts in the comments down below. Anyways, time to look for fighting game gimmicks.